Oh,
There
now
it
it
goes.
is.
I clicked it and then like nothing happened.
All right, Noah, I think we'll just hand it off to you if it's okay. We are going to record this.
Okay, yeah, and I think Tim from my office should also be joining us. And
Okay.
yeah, so what we were gonna do today is do like a very quick introduction to the DD Ombuds, and then I have like a video I was gonna show, and then we can answer any questions you all have. Maybe
Uh,
quickly, I'll just introduce myself. So I am the Region 3 DD Ombuds, which means I cover Pierce County, down to Vancouver, and in between, and then also like up the peninsula. And then we have an ombuds who covers basically King County North. And then Lisa, our ombuds in Spokane, covers Eastern Washington. So we use the same three DDA regions that DDA uses as our regions. So we'll do like our brief presentation today, and then we can leave some time for questions. And then I'll let Tim introduce himself, and I'll start the slideshow.
Hi there. Hi, I just got my audio working. No, were you saying for me to introduce myself?
Oh yeah, yeah, and I'll start the slideshow.
Great, cool. Hey everyone, my name's Tim McHugh. I am the self-advocacy educator here at the Office of Developmental Disabilities Ombuds.
Hi, Tim. Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Sorry, it is. Stop this for a second. I'm so I share the right screen. Okay, now you should see the PowerPoint.
All right, I see it.
Great.
Okay, all right, well, cool. So I'll go ahead and start. Um, oh, no, did you want to do this slide?
Yeah, I can do this slide. So typically before we do any presentation about the ombuds, we go over some like friendly reminders, we call them. So like just don't like if we talk about some people, like we have strict confidentiality, so like we won't be able to tell you about specific people that we've worked with, but we can still share like examples and stories. You all can give us information, and ask us questions, but you don't have to like share people's names or information. We can, if you do have complaints you want to talk to us about, we can definitely do that, individual or offline. We give general information about services, but sometimes we always let people know that what somebody gets through DDA is individualized and it's going to be based on that person's assessment. So I can't just say, oh, yeah, it sounds like you'll receive this service without reading the assessment. When people talk about their disabilities or family members' disabilities, we believe people. We work with anybody who has a developmental disability. We don't ask for any like documentation. Yeah, if we don't know something, we'll be honest. And also, if there is a word that we're using or I accidentally use an acronym, please feel free to let us know or ask us to clarify, and then feel free to jump in with questions in the chat. And I don't think it's on this slide, but also, we're going to be talking about abuse and neglect, sometimes sexual abuse, when we talk about our office. So just heads up if anybody needs to take a breath or leave for any reason, like we understand that.
Okay, so yeah, so we're going to talk about the DD Ombuds Office. you know, a lot of people come to us and they say, "What is an ombuds?" And they're like, you know, they've never heard that word before and they're not familiar with what that is. So yeah, so we're going to talk about it. All right. So the history of our office. So in 2015, people found out that a woman named Laura was being really severely abused and neglected by her caregiver that was being paid for by the state. And it was determined that part of the reason that happened is because Laura's DDA case manager wasn't checking on her enough um, in person to make sure that she was okay. And so, as a result of that, the Washington State Legislature in 2016 passed what's now known as Laura's Law. And so, Laura's Law did two really cool things. It created enhanced case management within DDA, which is something where if you're a person receiving DDA services and you're identified um, as being uh, isolated, right? You know, you don't have a whole lot of people checking on you and making sure you're okay. Then you can get enhanced case management, and among other things, your DDA case manager will visit you more times throughout the year. And then Laura's Law also created the Office of Developmental Disabilities Ombuds, which of course is our office. Um, so, um, the DD Ombuds. We are contracted through the state, through the Department of Commerce, so we're completely separate from DSHS and DDA. And we're run by a private nonprofit organization, which is Disability Rights Washington. So that means that we're able to be completely independent of the service system, kind of like, you know, the watchdogs, kind of, right? You know, we're making sure that DDA are doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And so we work in Washington State, all over the state, on the west and the east side, and we protect confidentiality. And so, like Noah was talking about earlier, you know, we're very careful about um, confidentiality with the things that people come and talk to us about. But who do we help? So, we help anyone with an intellectual or developmental disability who gets state services. And we help people no matter where they are or what their situation is, but especially if people live in their own home, in supported living, assisted living, adult family homes, or one of our four state institutions.
Yeah, and then just to go off this slide, so we help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But when we talk about our complaints and how we resolve complaints, we'll talk about how we receive complaints from a wide variety of people, from people with IDD, from family members, from friends of people with IDD. We even receive complaints sometimes by case managers, our guardians. So our goal is to help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but the way we do that is by working with a lot of other folks too in that process, all while remaining that confidentiality and keeping it person focused.
So how do we help people? We typically we will protect people's ability to make their own choices, right? So we help people with their advocacy. We take direction from the person with the disability, right? So even if someone else comes to us to make a complaint, like you know, their guardians or a friend of theirs or whoever it is, we first talk to that person with the disability to figure out what it is that they want us to do. Um, we're private, so we're not mandatory reporters under the state RCW, which allows us to really keep everything that is told to us confidential and private. The only exception to that is that we see something abusive that happens like right in front of us, then we have to report that. Um, yeah, Noah, did you want to expand on that a little bit?
No, I think you
Oh, okay.
did a good job of explaining it. If anybody has questions about that mandatory reporting, we can kind of go more in detailed into that too.
Yeah, and we work on a low level solutions. And so what that means is that the first step is to help an individual to see if we can solve their complaint just working with the person that they have the complaint about. But sometimes the lowest level that we can go to solve a complaint that someone has is systemic. And so we have to do that systemic advocacy to solve those complaints. Um, so the service system is super complicated, and one of the things that we do is to help people to be able to understand that service system, and we encourage the system to work the way it's supposed to work for people. But some of the things that we can't do is that we can't give people legal advice or help them with like we aren't lawyers, so we can't provide that. Um, and we can't fill out forms for people, but we can help them understand how to fill out the form, and we can't like twist DDA's arm and like force them to do anything.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm going to talk about how we kind of do our work. And part of that legal is like within our statute, like we can't provide legal services. So I'm going to talk about kind of the different categories of our work. And then these have some examples. And this is kind of like the bulk of our work. So we do information and referrals. So this could be if somebody has a concern, but it falls out of our scope or like our authority access. So one of those big buckets is sometimes with like housing. So there's local organizations that could help you better than we can, and then there's organizations that can help with housing. So for example, if Bob's landlord is discriminating against him because he's disabled, Bob's landlord doesn't want him to live in his apartment anymore. Bob needs somebody to help him advocate with his landlord. So like we wouldn't be the people who help Bob advocate with his landlord, but what we would do is connect him to either a free or low cost legal organization to help if their landlord is trying to evict him and that's against the law, or a tenants' rights organization to better understand his housing rights, what the landlord is and isn't allowed to ask for somebody. Where we do help people with housing is if somebody, say, is on the core waiver and they live in supported living, and where they're living is connected to their supported living provider, and their supported living provider is trying to terminate services, then that is where we would get involved. Or if an adult family home is trying to evict somebody or terminate somebody's services without going through the proper steps, that's where our office would get involved, and that's where we do what we call complaint resolution. So complaint resolution, and this is kind of like the bulk of our work, is we work with individuals with developmental disabilities, families, or legal representatives to try and resolve complaints about services. So here's like one example. Sarah applied for DDA services for her 8-year-old daughter. Sarah was told by her daughter's case resource manager that they would schedule a functional assessment in 2 weeks. It has been 2 months and Sarah hasn't heard from her case manager. Sarah contacts the DD Ombuds and submits a complaint. The Ombuds calls the case resource manager supervisor and asks for a functional assessment to be scheduled. The functional assessment is scheduled, and then we could even attend that and support Sarah and her daughter to help it go well. So our complaints can really be about DDA services in themselves. So like, in Region 3, we've heard that the gap between getting DDA eligible and then getting the assessment and getting onto a waiver is taking sometimes months. So that's where we can come in, find out, why is it taking so long for this person? Is there a different case manager that can fill in? Can the person go somewhere to see a different case manager maybe? We've had some people in more like rural areas in the region, drive to an office in Vancouver to meet somebody to speed up the process, or somebody kind of up the peninsula going to like Bremerton or Pierce, County to get an assessment done, or to meet with somebody to go over like why they're not deemed eligible. So we can't help somebody if they're like appealing services, or like if there's a plan action notice, but if it's what information is needed, we can help find that out and help people navigate that process. Some of our other types of complaints can be around abuse and neglect in different settings. So we do visits, and we visit people who are, say, living with a supported living provider, and if they have questions or concerns about their rights, we would meet with that provider and with the case manager to see what's going on, help somebody file residential care service complaints, work with their case manager if maybe they don't have enough hours for staffing. Can there be a updated assessment? If somebody does get their services terminated, now there's what they call the critical case protocol meetings that we can sit in on and try to talk about possible solutions or ask about other services. This is really helping people who get services get the services that they should be receiving and make their services work better for them. And we know that some people make complaints through our website, through calling us. We have interpreters that we can use, but we also know that not everybody knows about our office. You all might not know about our office, so that's why we also do monitoring. So this is where we visit places where people get services. So we have, in our statute, we have the mandate to do monitoring, and that's also how we sometimes get our complaints. So sometimes it's people telling us to go somewhere. So like in this example, the DD Ombuds is told by someone that they are helping with a complaint, Lucy, that her supported living provider isn't treating her and her housemates well. The DD Ombuds schedules a time to visit Lucy at her house so they can check on her and her housemates. When the DD Ombuds visits, they see problems with the way the supported living provider is treating Lucy. The DD Ombuds work with the supported living provider and Lucy to help resolve her concerns so she is treated well. So our monitoring visits can be, we've had parents who said, I live in Spokane, but my daughter lives in Tacoma with this supported living agency. That's the only provider that would accept her when we were transitioning. Can you do like a visit? So we can do visits that way. We also go onto the supported living locator that Residential Care Services puts all their investigations online. So we also see kind of, are there places we should go visit because they're having some concerns or complaints there. We also visit people at the state institutions. So like Rainier State School is in Region 3, so we do monitoring visits and take complaints from Rainier, our region. And then the other ombuds go to the other institutions at the other regions. So we take all that information and then we try to, do individual advocacy, but then also systemic advocacy. So we write reports that are on our website that help us with our systemic work and hopefully help others with their systemic work too. So our first report was called Diverting Crisis, and this was all about maintaining housing and supports for people with developmental disabilities if either they went into crisis or their provider went into crisis. So like we heard a story about this mother had to get a knee surgery and her son had nowhere to go while she was in the hospital. So the son actually had a developmental disability, just slept at the hospital because they couldn't find a different provider while she was recovering. Or we've had parents pass away and there's a long couple months before a provider can be found. So like, where does that person live? So that report kind of led us into our second report, which we call Stuck in the Hospital, because unfortunately we found that the people with IDD are stuck in our hospitals in either emergency rooms or they will be admitted to the hospital, but then they can't discharge out. It was pretty concerning, so we wrote that report. Then our next report we did was around improving services for youth with IDD who are in the foster care system. So we were finding that when somebody was aging out of foster care, they had this gap of services before they got DDA services. Also, people couldn't be receiving both, so there were like foster youth who needed like some DDA type services, but they couldn't get them because they were in DCOIF. So there was some legislation that made it so people could utilize both services, and there is now transition coordinators and transition planning. And then we wrote a report called No Way Out, and it was an introduction to the Community Protection Program. And this is a program that is one of the DDA waivers that we received many complaints about people feeling like they were stuck in the program, like they couldn't graduate. They might have been in the program for 10, 15 years and don't have a way to get out of the program. And it's a restrictive 24-hour supervision program. So right now there's actually a bill that is on the House floor, 1390, that would change and get rid of the community protection program and put people in different waivers in receiving some of those same supports that we're hoping could pass this legislative session. And there's a timeline for how DDA would transition people out of the program to keep them safe and keep them receiving the supports and services they need. And then also, I don't think I put it on this slide, but we also have a report called I Want to Go Home, and that's around youth who are stuck in the hospital or getting sent out of state to other to like facilities because there are not places, they weren't getting the services they need in our state. And all of these things are on our website, and I was just going to show you that real quick. Are you seeing our website? Great. So on our website, we have a video that's really good explainer that we have with closed captions in 7 different languages that you could share with people. Also on our website, we have our research page. We have our DD Ombuds brochures in English, Korean, Russian, Somali, Spanish, Tagalog, Chinese, and Vietnamese. So those are available on our website to share. And then all of the reports that I just talked about are on our website. And there's some follow-up reports too around the community protection. And Tim did one that's narrated for people. So that is like a very quick overview of the DD Ombuds. Sometimes we'll go into more details about our type of complaints we receive and the services, but we wanted just to do a short kind of overview for you all today and then have some time for questions.
Great, Noah, thank you. I have a question. When someone is wanting or needing to make a complaint or a report, If they are somebody who is under a guardianship and they are wanting to make a report about their guardian, are they able to do that with you?
Yes, they're able to do that with us. We can take a complaint from somebody, and if it's about their guardian, um, that's where we would try to help them. We could also talk to with their consent, then also talk to their guardian about what's working, what's not working. If somebody wants a new guardian, we could like explain the process, but then that is through like the legal system. So we couldn't, we wouldn't be their like attorney through that process. But in any guardian hearing, somebody should get an appointed representative. So we would like explain somebody that process if that's what they wanted, and then we wouldn't be the person that then followed through with that. But hopefully it could also be like there's been times where we've met with a person and their guardian, try to have some conversations, or met with that person in DDA and the guardian and kind of see like where the conflict is in that situation, and then talked about other alternatives too that might work for the person, like support decision making or other like least restrictive alternatives.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Question, but thank you so much for your presentation. It was very informative.
Thanks.
I know Noah and I have worked together with a few clients throughout the years, and him and the ombuds have been very helpful. No, they're a great resource, and I very much encourage anybody if they're having any issues or just even just answering questions, I think is invaluable. The knowledge that you guys have.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think like we didn't go too into like our statute, but I think our office is different than some of the other advocates who work with parents and families and folks with IDD is we have that like authority to like request records and to like sit in on some meetings and like help review those with people. So I know I work with like other advocates where like they're helping families, and then they might get to a point where okay, we've done as much as we can, but now we need somebody to kind of do some more in forms of like working with those providers or working directly with DDA and the case managers, or escalating concerns. Or Tim talked about the lowest level, but then there are some complaints that we've like risen up to like the field service administrator or the regional administrator because that person can't find what they need. And then sometimes it's like a systemic issue that then we try to, what can we do to solve it while we're working on some of those systemic areas so the person's not either being harmed or getting some services that could be helpful.
The phone number to call for DD Ombudsman.
Yes. Oh, sorry. It is 833 727 8900.
And is this, I think I missed it. Is this regional or statewide or?
So that number would take you to our, we have a staff assistant that takes the initial complaints and then directs people to the different regional ombuds. And then I also put our website in the chat. It's like we were one of the first DD ombuds in the country, so our website is just ddombuds.org. There's other types of ombuds, but we're one of the first that are specific to the DD community in their state.
So we have a question in the chat. It says, what kind of help is available to help a family to bring their child back to Washington? It's a young child that is in a residential setting on the East Coast.
Yeah, so in like cases like that we've been involved in, it would be meeting with that person should have like a case manager still while they're in the other state, getting them back onto the core, I would assume that this person would be on the core waiver if they're needing that type of support. So when somebody is out of the state and not receiving services, sometimes they drop off the waiver. So it'd be getting them back on to the waiver first, making that happen, because that could take some time. And then it might be getting some notes from the residential setting that they're on in the East Coast, maybe like update for their referral packets, update any like changes that might, like if they were sent out of state because they couldn't find a provider in our state, there might be some things that changed while they were away that we could like renew the referral packets, look for other services, and then start having those meetings and then sending out their packets to like providers while the person is still out of state, and then kind of basically set up their transition before they come back. And that could take, time. If it's like a youth who's, aging into adult, it would also be making sure that their adult services are being set up, and that search is starting. Because like right now we're seeing, and I don't know if like you all do any of this type of work, but like looking for a new supported living provider and then finding the provider and then that transition is taking like 1 to almost like 5 months and sometimes longer. So like doing some of that work before that child is back in our state, so they can have those set up. And we do have some youth solas that I've worked with, and some new like youth residential service providers. I know that is growing in our state, to hopefully like reduce kids going out of state, and then also help the youth come back to our state. But we can meet with those families, talk about that, and then talk to DDA to make sure everything is kind of getting in place and with their insurance. And sometimes I know like the schools sometimes are funding the residential, sometimes it's private insurance. So it's like working out those kinks first before that youth comes back, and we could meet with DDA and that family to like start having those conversations.
They reach out to you, can they, do you have a list of youth residential providers, or how do they find those?
Yeah, there's a locator online that I could share with them and we can talk about. And then the solas, I don't know if like the youth solas have any like openings right now, but that's something that I can inquire about.
I'll just send them your way. Just curious.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any solas in our area, Noah?
I think for you all, the closest solas are in Tacoma for the youth. Yeah. I worked with one family who was in Cowlitz County, and their son moved to Pierce County to one of the youth solas, and it's working pretty well. So that's good.
Oh, any more questions from anyone? All right. Well, Noah, Tim, thank you so much for coming this, I guess, afternoon. We're after 12 now. It was so great to see you, Noah and Tim. Very nice to meet you. I really look forward to working with you both closely in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, feel free to reach out if anybody has questions.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.